All right, so we're gonna talk about the backline for Matsuri Hana, and the important thing here is it's about grooving together, establishing a pocket. This is a term that's used to describe when you are just locked in a groove with someone that you can expect and count on them to play when you're expecting it, and when the whole ensemble is in that pocket together, that's when things get really beautiful here. All right, so for the backline, we're talking mainly Odaiko Shime for now, but it's going to be, talk a little bit about elephant too. Okay, so for your Shime, I think first of all, I think one thing that you can kind of do to make sure we're thinking about this the same, playing the same, is make sure that you can kind of say the other line while you're doing one. If I'm playing the Shime, do I know where the Odaiko beats? Sa, don, 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 don. It should kind of groove and feel good together. If you're playing Odaiko, do you have a sense of don, 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 so I would practice maybe being able to sing the other line while you're playing one or the other. Okay. So I want to now talk about, let's go to the Shime, and one thing that I want to say is I think there's like one trick, like if there's like one thing you can do to make your Shime sound better, especially starting out first, is over the years I've found out it's really what you're doing dynamically, and I think it's your second hit and your last hit. So if you're gonna play this line, I think it's gonna be good if you make that second hit as quiet as possible. Ten, 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 is the kind of the most basic phrase you're playing that's repeated, right? So you want to accent that the loudest hit is 10, that last 10. The quietest hit is the second 10, 10, 10, quiet, 10, 10, loud at the end, right? So in a sequence, that kind of gives this kind of locked in feel, right? That we're kind of we cue and especially to do this 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, right? And one, right? It gets us back into the next phrase, right? So number one thing for Shime is if you can make that line dynamic, there's nothing quite as jarring, I think, as a Shime that's just hitting all those accents, or even accenting them kind of weirder. Not really going to work this song. So I think that's a really quick way to get better at this song, is by making that Shime dynamic. Now, what are some other ways we can make the Shime dynamic? Well, with the Shime, we're actually playing a set, right? We have more than one drum that we can work with. So we could just use the dynamic control to get a nice groove going here. But we could also maybe use a different drum too. You know, use some different varieties that you can do to make that happen. This is kind of a rock one, you know, but you can play around with different feels by using both dynamics and pitch or voice to really make that line shine, right? So let's go to Odaiko. Odaiko, similar, you're playing less notes, right? But it's still, the dynamic control here is we're accenting that first and last one. Don, 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 don is kind of where your dynamic phrasing is there. You're still playing, I would say, loud. Don, 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 don. You can accent the first hit more to don, 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 don. That works there. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant really quick here. How does that elephant fit into this ensemble? So if you notice, whether we're playing the Shime or the Odaiko, that 2 is kind of de-accented, whereas like kind of 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. The 4 and the 1 in that phrase are the accents, right? So if you're playing the elephant, one of the most simple ways to play is actually what we do, the 2/4. So this is kind of what you hear the auxiliary playing a lot of times too, right? This is kind of nice because you end up accenting one note that's different from the other, so that we get a little bit of interplay between the two sides of the stage, and it makes elephant kind of stand out when it does play the 2, where most of the ensemble does not accent the 2, but it comes back together with them, for the 4. So that's kind of like the most simple way to play elephant, but I think elephants definitely, you can do a lot there. You can really, depending on your ensemble and your needs, you can kind of really help accent that Odaiko, particularly if it's being drowned out. Kind of give it the end of the line, that oomph there too. Elephant's probably the most flexible for however you want to play. Okay, so let's see. I think that's, so now I wanted to talk about the next step about kind of developing that pocket together is being able to ultimately what you want to do is create like this sound landscape, right? Being in the pocket also lets us, there should be a period of time where we can kind of know is a basis of time passing, right? And it's it's kind of more groovier too if that's longer than just a measure, right? Because I think it's very easy to if you're playing just a backbeat for a song, to just think that, well, this is just a very, very small thing that's just on loop, right? But if we can make those loops a little bit longer, it gives some texture to the piece, right? Especially when the song's phrasing is centered around some sort of, or has a natural cadence to it. And by that I mean, if you're playing Shio, right? The lines, doko, 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 dom, dom, doko, they have there's a natural cadence that they 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? There's an 8 count kind of makes up a phrase in the language of Shio, right? In Matsuri Hana, let's consider this, right? Let's look at the A line. Doko, kodoko, doko, doko, kodoko, doko, kodoko, kodon, right? So I think it's actually 2 8 counts that kind of make a natural rhythm. So that's one. So I think a 2 8 count is, to me, what's a kind of a nice pocket to kind of establish, right? And so how can you do that if you're playing a backbeat, a Shime, or an Odaiko, so that you're not just playing the same thing on loop, but you're actually kind of you're grooving with the front choose a little bit more, and kind of establishing a longer basis of groove, right? And maybe one other quick example, like if you listen to kind of R&B, kind of soul, James Brown, kind of Wilson Pickett. I had like a really good bass line I like is Tyrone Davis, Turn Back the Hands of Time. The bass is so it establishes like this is the unit of time that the phrases of the lyrics are gonna like go around this, that's the basic unit of time, right? So let's try to apply that to Matsuri Hana. And if we're gonna do 2 8 counts, what can we do to maybe differentiate them a bit more? So this is kind of where adding accent, fill, kind of splash can kind of help. So if we're in a that's adding like a lot of color, right? But it kind of like where we add color can help us establish that pocket. So I would suggest maybe starting by trying to add a little bit of flavor, particularly at the end of one of those 2/8 counts. So I'll just play on one drum. Dum, 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 dum. See? Dum, 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 dum. Playing around with just the end of one of those 2/8 count pockets is kind of a good way to practice that too. And that's the same for the Odaiko too. Dum, 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 dum. I think you might want to consider where you are on the song, what's going on with that front line. And then I think the kind of the beauty and the fun of like fills and kind of splash and stuff is like you're playing around, you're interacting with what else is going on in the set while still maintaining a really consistent groove. Okay, so that's kind of, I think, the next level to really making Matsuri Hanabi sound good. So let's review really quick. So first of all, kind of knowing and knowing the lines and establishing a pocket. It's gonna be able to know the other line if you're playing Shime. Dum, 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 dum. If you're playing Odaiko, you can play tense, ten, tense, ten, tense, ten, tense, ten. And then the next step, making sure that we're accenting or using dynamics in a way that sound good and feel groovy, right? It's de-accenting that second hit, right? And accenting count 4. And then trying to add more voices to kind of get a good feel. And lastly, adding kind of some color to establish a longer pocket. So that's kind of some tips to making a nice, fun backline, and I hope you can kind of have fun and play around with your parts. Okay.